loose and fancy free. And when you're a young person, you can build a life pretty quick. And so I met a lot of great musicians. And North Carolina has always been a magnet for all kinds of music, string band music that I love, and the bluegrass music and old time music, but also blues. You know, when folks would go down and play around the tobacco markets, and you had those great blues players that would you know, they were smart guys, and on payday they would go down and they would play around the warehouses and make a fairly decent bit of money. It's like, I want to be like those guys. I want to be that smart. And so that's one of the things about this kind of music and traditional music is it's the great music that you learn, but it's also the older players that you learn from about how to be good to folks when they come to your house, how to make folks feel welcome. And so that's, as I've gotten older, you know, and have become one of those older players on the wheel of time, that's what I try and do when a younger person comes and wants to either hang out or learn from me or just show me what they've been working on.
Right, definitely. And I have noticed that even among like the folk community, I've seen it at the definitely the Festival here in Durham, and I've just seen it in general. It does seem like there seems to be a revival. At least that's my opinion. I was wondering to know if you agreed or not, but there seems to be a revival and a growing interest in not just bluegrass, but folk music and a lot of what people call roots music. So I was wondering if that's been your feeling, that there seems to be a growing revival, and if there is that growing revival, what do you think is the cause of that?
I think that traditional music is cyclical. With each generation, there comes some big event or some movie or some album that comes out that sparks people's interest. I play all around the country and all around the world, playing basically country and roots music, and people who are country people everywhere like country music. So there's something when I play in Australia, when I play overseas, when I play in Germany, when I play on the continent of Europe, people who have country music or country in their background, they love it. And so, like I just turned 60, so my generation, a huge thing was the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band's Circle album, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? And it exposed people to a lot of this music that they might not have heard before. Right around that same time, the movie Deliverance came out with the theme from Deliverance and that banjo. 10 years before that, Andy Griffith and the Beverly Hillbillies that had traditional music in. And it's done it all the way back to Edison recording vocalists and fiddlers to the Bristol sessions 90 years ago now in 1927, where they recorded all sorts of roots music. So I do see it. I see an uptick. It's honest music. It's music from the heart, and that's stuff that is in short supply sometimes. We need this music.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. One of the things I love about the music is the honesty of the music and how it's just so true to what the emotions are and what the person is going through in terms of their life and things of that nature. So it definitely seems to be very much connected to that. Now, you mentioned it earlier, and I think a lot of people that don't know necessarily the history of the instrument, and you are a banjo player and a fiddler.
Yes, sir.
But I was wondering if you could share a little bit of the history of the banjo, because we've actually talked about it on the show before, but a lot of people don't understand that the banjo is actually an African-oriented instrument that came here to the States and got kind of adopted by folks in the Appalachians and other things. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit of that history with us, just so folks who are listening, this might be new information to them.
Of course, it is. I call it the truly American instrument because it was brought here with enslaved people. When folks were brought here in slavery, they brought their music, and it was a way for them to retain their heritage and their culture. It came here with probably 2 strings and a drone string, a 5th string, that string that's tuned a little higher, that gives that characteristic sound. They started adding strings. It started out as a gourd instrument with an animal hide stretched across for the head. At some point, they added a 5th the 5th string and put it onto a drum. I say to people that, you know, your right hand is a stick and the banjo is a drum. It's a rhythm instrument. And so then around the time of the even before the Civil War, it was pretty much played by African Americans here, and then transmitted out. And it's basically it's an African instrument that white folks learned how to play. But if you looked at all the great string bands before the turn of the 20th century, they were all African American string bands. And so Joe Thompson, the much loved and much missed African American fiddler from Alamance County, he told great stories about hearing white musicians sitting up all night curing tobacco and listening to them and having these tunes go back and forth across the two different communities and sometimes playing music together. One of the greatest sessions I've ever been in, music sessions, was with Joe Thompson and a white banjo player from Lee County named Marvin Gaster, and they started comparing tunes that they had in common. Do you know that Georgia Buck? Yeah, I know that Georgia Buck. You want to play that Georgia Buck? Yeah, let's play that Georgia Buck. And to watch those two men play those tunes in common was one of the most stirring things I've ever seen.
Wow. So just when you got first into the music, who were some of the people? You've alluded to some, Joe Thompson, but I was wondering who were some of the other people that influenced you and your style of playing, and that you felt that really inspired you when you first got into it as a young man. Now you're in your early 60s, but when you first got into it, who were some of the people that influenced you?
Well, I'm from Missouri, and so a lot of fiddlers in Missouri, when you say, what kind of banjo playing do you like, they'll often say, quiet. And so it wasn't until I moved down to Arkansas that I started running into great banjo players down there, people like Bookmiller Shannon. In Missouri, there were a couple of folks that Jack Deck. There was a couple of people of my generation, Kathy Barton, Joel Zimmer. I came out here, and it was like I was like a kid in a candy store. Odell Thompson, Joe Thompson's cousin, was an incredible banjo player with the most driving right hand of anybody you'd ever hear. Players like Kyle Creed, Fred Cockram, people in my generation, Andy Kahn, all these folks, they were just they were heroes of mine, and then I got to know them. I listened to the Red Clay Ramblers when I was in college, and I moved out here. I could not believe that they were sitting in my living room having a beer. You know, to me, they were just guys on records, and now I get to play with a lot of those folks. I play with Jim Watson and Bill Hicks and Mike Craver, who were three of the founders of the Red Clay Ramblers. You know, I'm just I'm the luckiest little hillbilly you've ever met.
Now, you talk about the music, and I definitely remember growing up as a teenager watching Andy Griffin, and of course there's that famous scene from Deliverance and everything. But sometimes the image that they gave of country players and bluegrass players was also very stereotypical. So I was wondering, do you still find that people still have that you have to fight that stereotype sometimes? Because a lot of times,
I think you do. I have a no hay bale clause in my contracts. I don't want to have hay bales on the stage. Mr. Monroe dressed his guys in the nicest suits they could find because it was serious music. You know, I say that my family in Missouri, we identified as hillbillies. That's what we were. But the hillbillies that I knew were the smartest, most capable people I'd ever seen, and it used to be this big dichotomy for me to hear about the Beverly Hillbillies and watch how they didn't know what a pool table was, or that they would use the pool cues to pass their victuals around the fancy eating table, or that they called the swimming pool the cement pond. That just didn't, part of humor is being broad, but that never really matched up. The Andy Griffith Show was more like the people I grew up with, Andy was sort of the all-wise person that could fix any problem. He did it with kindness, which I always loved. If you go back and see those shows, especially the ones before Don Knotts left, you'll see Andy Griffith being sort of the all-knowing Greek chorus, and he made sure that everybody came out all right. It's a beautiful thing actually to watch.
Yeah, I definitely, like I said, I remember watching that show, and it definitely was enjoyed watching it. And there's a lot of times there were even like moral tales within the shows. Now, for those people that hear that word and everything, how would you define the word hillbilly in your own definition? Not the Webster definition, but the Joe Newberry definition. How would you define
the Joe Newberry definition of hillbilly would be somebody who comes from more of the Scots Irish in Missouri and Arkansas at least, capable people who families sort of stick to themselves. When you live way out in the hills, you're sort of isolated, and you have to be good at a lot of things. I love the notion when you say hillbillies that it's not a pejorative for me. They're some of the smartest and most capable people I've ever met.
Wow. Well,
did we have somebody at the door?
I think we have somebody else at the door. Let's see who else is at the door.
Hello.
Hello, is this Val Smith?
Yes, it is.
How are you doing, Val Smith? Val Smith is a singer as well. How would you describe your music style? We've been talking to Joe Newberry, who's definitely a pioneer in bluegrass and folk music, but how would you define your music and Liberty Pike?
Well, I'd say I'm contemporary bluegrass. I'd say contemporary bluegrass with an edge of traditional at times.
Now, what did you see as the difference? Yeah. Now, what did you see as the difference? I know that Joe is more of a traditional kind of style musician, and of course we have around here Rihanna and the Carolina Chocolate Drops, who have definitely incorporated traditional, but you call yourself contemporary. And it seems to me that I'm curious as to what your definition of contemporary bluegrass is. And then I was also going to ask Joe, it does seem like we're getting more of a mixture of music, because I think we talked about it on this show before. One of the greatest bluegrass groups that I saw actually incorporates hip-hop into their music, and that's the group that has been at IBMA a couple of times by the name of Gangstagrass. And I'm sitting there going like, who would have thought of incorporating standard hip-hop and bluegrass? But somehow these folks came up with that concept and seem to be doing quite successfully at it. So it does seem like in society now, just in general, we have a lot of blending of musical styles. Would you agree with that?
I'd agree to that. With me, I never really put a lot of thought into, what I was doing with my music, whether I was, blending traditional or contemporary or, I always just did what was really natural for me and what felt right. And it just, it fell into the bluegrass category. But I would say I'm one of those artists that I never have really just gone, in a direction where I said, I'm going to do this with my bluegrass music. I've always felt better about just doing what was honest with what, I felt was musically the direction I wanted to go.
Wow. And how did you get involved in bluegrass? Like I said, Joe said that he came from a family of folks that were musically inclined, and he's in his 60s. And if you don't mind, if you want to share your age, you can. But if you don't, we're not going to press you on it. But I just wondered how you got involved in the bluegrass community.
Well, I kind of came in the back door myself. I am a Missouri girl, and I studied music at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, and I studied opera and jazz and blues, and went on. Ended up moving to Nashville about 1996, and just kind of fell into a lot of musicians and songwriters that just happened to be within the bluegrass folk vein of songwriting, singer-songwriters like, Tim O'Brien, Sean Kemp, Mel Besher,